Okay, this one's tough. We're at inflation 4, the inflationing. I never thought I would spend this much time talking about inflation, but apparently, once I get my brain going, apparently, and basically, inflation affects everything. Everything is different, and everything has to be thought of in terms of inflation. I just kept thinking of everything and anything that I came up with. Inflation played a really big role in it, such that it would be totally different if there were no inflation. But since there is, you got to look at something certain different ways. So, previous lessons. Yep, that was 3 other lessons on inflation. This lesson, a talk on inflation. Future lessons, I 100% hope that it's not about inflation. All right, let's get it going. So, up until now, it's been a given that you're going to set money aside to help you live in retirement if you want to stop working at all. Okay? And up until now, we have been using, and many people use it interchangeably, saving versus investing. But because of inflation, saving versus investing actually is the words you have to focus in on. So why you need to invest and not save. They're actually different. So saving is like keeping your money, okay? Just basically not spending your money. And now you got your money. And then the years pass, and what happens to that money is not good. Investing is, first you save your money, you don't spend your money, and then you put your money to work. You put it somewhere. You put it somewhere worthwhile, somewhere where it will grow. And how do you choose where you put it? Well, you need to put it somewhere where it makes more than inflation, okay? And so let's go through 3 scenarios, the 3 likely scenarios, okay? So the first one, let's say you get to save $1,000 and you keep it, you saved it, you kept it. Now, you might put it in what's called a savings account. Well, they don't call it an investing account. They don't call it a growing money account. They call it a savings account. It'll save your money and your money will do like literally nothing, okay? So it's a savings account. You might put it in a checking account, which is even worse than a savings account for growing. Okay, you can check it not growing at any time. Yeah, you could put it under your bed or bury it in the backyard. Okay, you're saving it. So think about it. Because of inflation, because costs rise, let's say you take $1,000 and then you wait 40 years. And don't catch me on the numbers. I did these really quick. It's close enough. It's close enough, and it proves a concept. You worked really hard and you saved $1,000 one year, and then you want to use it in retirement. It's only worth $330. Sorry, that was a typo. So you saved $1,000, waited 40 years, and it's only going to be about worth $330, if not less, in 40 years because prices have risen. So in real dollars, it's like you had $1,000 and now you can only buy $330 worth of stuff. So your money has lost purchasing power. Your money's lost value. So that's why you have to invest. You have to put that money somewhere where it will grow year to year, will get you an average yearly interest rate. So you could do it in 2 different ways. You can invest $1,000 at something close to inflation. And you can do this and you'll have the same amount of real dollars in 40 years. So in $1,000 invested in CDs or bonds or money, certain money markets, it'll grow about 2% a year. So after 40 years, you literally will have your original $1,000 will grow into $3,000, but the purchasing power will still be $1,000 adjusted for inflation. So finding something that gives you money every year at the rate of inflation means your money will stay the same. So you've invested it, but you're treading water. You haven't gone anywhere. But anyone who's serious about making money with the money that they save, they invest it in something that'll return greater than inflation. So $1,000 invested in the stock market or in real estate, $1,000 invested, that earns an average of 5 to 8% per year. So in 40 years, you will have at least 3,000 real dollars. So if you could, you have $1,000 and you could purchase 100 stuff, 40 years later, that same $1,000 will purchase 300 stuff because it has grown so much, okay? So there you go. You need to not just save the money so it's in your pocket, you then have to invest it. And you don't have to, you don't invest it in something really low at inflation growth. You invest it in the best you can that's not going to go to zero. The stock market's not going to go to zero. Real estate's not going to go to zero. It's going to go up and down, but on average, it's going to go 5 to 8. Anything better than the stock market or real estate has a good chance of going to zero possibly, so you never want to invest in that. for your retirement account. Play money, do whatever the heck you want. Okay, so let's go through 4 scenarios, 3 of what not to do, and 1 of what to do. And it's actually almost kind of going generationally, although there is a little bit of, I'll get into it. So, many young people don't save at all, okay? More older people save. You know why more older people start saving and investing? Because they're scared, because they know they're not going to have enough money in retirement. Younger people don't even think about it. So a lot of young people don't save at all. That's what we call living paycheck to paycheck. Whatever money comes in, they spend. They're not thinking about and not worrying at all. Guess what? You'll worry when the rest of your life is going to be working until you die or starting to save and invest for your retirement. That's when you start thinking. Young people don't usually think about that. It's only when you're actually faced with that possibility. So a lot of people start out, they don't save at all. That's a negative. You can't do that. Okay. The days are gone where you can do a retirement without any of your own money. Okay. So, that was kind of how the, Generation X, the people who grew up in the, late 80s and early 90s, they were in high school, late 80s, early 90s. They started out not saving at all, man, not at all. And they were so far behind the, pool 8 ball is they have right now, Generation X, my generation, not me. I started a little bit earlier. No, I was this. I didn't save at all for the first 10 years. First 8 years. So right now, Generation X is scrambling. They're scared out of their minds because they want to retire and they don't got savings. So they're starting to save and invest a lot. Why? Because they didn't save at all. Well, millennials came around, and millennials, they got smarter, okay? But they were scared. A lot of millennials saw a market crash in 2008 and really got scared, but they never should be, they shouldn't have gotten scared. They really shouldn't have. They should have had a better plan. So a lot of millennials started thinking, they're like, I got to save for retirement. They didn't want to make the same mistake about Generation X. So they started saving, but they didn't do it right. They either saved, which was totally 100% stable in like savings accounts, getting nothing, or they were so scared they stayed away from the stock market and they stayed away from real estate. And so they invested in what they thought was safe. They're confusing. They think they did stable. Stable bad is what they invested in. So they were only basically either losing their money, which is better than not saving it at all, but their money was shrinking every single year, or they were treading water. So if you only save every year, prices rise and you lose purchasing power. If you put in something too stable, safe shouldn't be good. It's too stable. Such a low return. Their money was staying the same. But you know what, millennials? Good job. At least you tried. And so you'll have a little bit. You'll still have to work really hard when 20 years before retirement. You didn't do it good enough. You're still going to have to work really hard. But there you go. At least you did better than my generation. And now we're on to Generation, Z. Next generation. Generation Z knows what's going on. The advice is to invest. When you're young, you put your investment money in the stock market and real estate. It's what you do. It's what all the advisors advise. Not me. The financial advisors invest. The young 20-somethings, you put it in the stock market and real estate. And yeah, it's going to be volatile. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. But as long as you don't sell, as long as you stay to the plan, it grows 5 to 8% a year. Now, I do notice something's very interesting, Generation Z. You're screwing it up. You got it. You're putting your money where it should be, stock market and real estate. But you know what you're doing? You're playing it yourself. You're gambling. You're buying companies yourself. You don't know what you're doing. Especially with the 2020 pandemic, a lot of Generation Z just started putting a lot, 20-somethings and really early 30s. They had a lot of time and a lot of money, and they started picking their own stock market and picking their own real estate. Let me tell you something. That's just gambling. Most of the people didn't do enough research, and you don't know how to do it. Literally, Generation Z was pouring millions, if not $1 billion, into bankrupt companies. Companies were going bankrupt, and they were buying their stocks. Let's see how that works out. It's a dangerous game to play. So Generation Z, at least you've got to save your money, invest it in the stock market and real estate, but don't be too smart for your own good. You got to find the plan. You got to find the advisor. It's simple. Keep it simple, stupid. KISS. Keep it simple and stick to the plan. So they're going a little overboard, this Generation Z, and they're going to get burnt. They're going to get burnt. Okay, so let's talk about, since there's inflation and the possibility of inflation, let's talk about what the government thinks about it. Well, first off, Supreme Court doesn't care about the economy, doesn't care about, not their job, doesn't care about inflation. Congress, House, Senate, cares about inflation, cares about the economy, too much other interests. They want to do way too many things with the economy, not focused enough. President, same thing, cares about the economy, way too many things they want to get done. Government banks, the one part of government that's laser focused on one thing, keeping inflation 1 to 3% per year. Since the 1990s, inflation, rise of prices is so bad. A 5, 6, 7, 10% rise of price per year is so bad for an economy. The government banks have literally one job that they care more about than anything else. Try to keep inflation to about 2% a year. Since the 1990s, and you know what? They have been doing a good job. Like, I think they have. Inflation hasn't, it's been around that 2 or 3%. And like, what else keeps it there? What else keeps it there? I think, you know, you can't prove cause and effect, but it's pretty, after 30 years now, it's pretty locked in that the government is kind of, you know, they haven't lost it yet, but we'll see going forward. Since the 1990s, the government bank, it's called the Federal Reserve. It's actually a lot of government banks, but just say Federal Reserve. Basically, their only job is to keep inflation at 1 to 2%. And they do that with the simple formula. More money is higher prices. More money is higher inflation. If everyone has a lot more money, the businesses raise their prices. If everyone has a lot less money, the businesses don't raise their prices. They just figure out how to keep going year to year. So, since the Federal Reserve government bank can control the money supply, whenever they think you need to slow the economy down so the prices don't rise, they take out money. Whenever they need prices to rise, so if inflation's at 0 or it looks like things are too slow, they put money in. Okay? Keep the economy going, but not too much. Control the money supply. Okay, let's talk about how inflation affects people in retirement. Now, they often say that retired people are on a, quote, fixed income, meaning their income doesn't increase. That's wrong, okay? It's actually wrong. It's close to fixed. What really it means is people who are retired aren't getting raises. At best, people who are retired are getting cost of living adjustments to go up with inflation. But in reality, they're not really. So what's happening is every year into your retirement, unless you do something to fix this, every year in the average person's retirement, they have less and less and less purchasing power because of inflation. So there's three legs to the stool of someone's retirement. There's the government payment called Social Security, the person's own investments that they will take money out of, and if they're, I'm not saying lucky, some of them have pensions, their job pays them. Okay? Well, first off, one leg of the stool, the pension, usually doesn't have a cost of living increase. So every single year, whatever money someone's getting from their pension, the purchasing power goes down because inflation is up. Investments, you have a really big chunk of money that's still growing when you're retired. But remember, you're scooping out of like an ice cream thing. You're scooping out money to live. So when you retire, your big pile of cash doesn't get bigger. It's always coming down so you can live. So I guess that's fixed income. And finally, the government actually is going to adjust for inflation. So whatever the amount of money the government gives you, Social Security, it will increase every year with inflation. So it's a very good thing for retirement. They just don't give you a lot of money. It's poverty wages. Social Security is enough money to live in poverty when you're retired. So I guess at least that's good that it rises with inflation. So inflation affects the minimum wage a little bit too. If there were no inflation, you could set minimum wage at like $10 an hour. And since prices don't rise at all, you could keep the minimum wage at $10 an hour forever. And then someone's minimum wage job would always have the purchasing power of $10. But costs rise every year. So you get minimum wage of $10 this year. If minimum wage is $10 next year, that means the starting person, that $10 minimum wage, has less purchasing power. So minimum wage is very interesting. Because it's not raised every year. Minimum wage is not tied to inflation. So minimum wage stays at $10 for 4 or 5 years. Then it gets bumped to like $12 and it stays there for like 7 years. Then it gets bumped to $14, like, you know, whatever the numbers are. So every time the minimum wage stays sideways, the purchasing power actually gets down. So entry workers actually get poorer. And every time the minimum wage makes a big bump, they raise it, it just changes. It's a very down, up in a real purchasing power way. So it just makes minimum wage, it just makes it really weird to categorize like starting salary, minimum wage stuff, because it's not raised every year. And every year an intro worker's purchasing power goes down until the minimum wage gets raised. Here's your graph. And you can see minimum wage when minimum wage stays the same, the purchasing power goes down. When minimum wage, let me make it big. See, this is the nominal, the actual number, and this is the real dollars purchasing power. Minimum wage hasn't changed for these years. Look at the purchasing power go down. Minimum wage hasn't changed for multiple years. Look at the purchasing power go down. Okay? Here, hasn't changed. So you get this idea. Down, up. Well, that was a little weird. Down, 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 up, and down. So the fact that minimum wage is not tied to inflation makes things very, very interesting, let's say, to say the least. Oh yeah, what would happen if we tied the minimum wage to inflation? It would change things. No one is good enough to know how that will affect the major, biggest economy as a whole. It probably wouldn't shatter it drastically. It would definitely change things though. I don't know. I think it's too late. I think I've been on inflation for far too long to really get in depth in this. I would love for someone to think about it, and really go in depth. Inflation is so slow for the last 30 years. It's only 2%. You don't realize it. You really don't realize that prices are rising like that. And so 20, 30 years go by, and you can really get mentally stuck about what thinking things should cost. I got mentally stuck, and I think bread should cost $1 a loaf, and that is totally not what it is. But that's what I think. I'm stuck. I think meat should be $2 a pound. It's not. You've got to go $4.50 for beef, for the cheap beef. People get stuck with these prices. Quick story about that. I was at a Board of Education meeting, right? Every year they do a teacher's contract. They got to raise the taxes, okay, to pay for teachers and stuff. And someone stood up and they said, I was a teacher in the 70s and I look at the starting salary of the teachers nowadays, and everyone here, you superintendents, you did a great job really, really increasing the pay of the teachers so they are really well paid and valued and respected. And I think they said, when I was a teacher, I got starting salary of $5,000 or something like that. And then at the time, starting salary was $40,000. So this person was stuck in their own pay in the 1970s. And I sat there going, I 100% bet that we are getting paid the same as you in real dollars. So there was enough. I went to my inflation calculator. I looked up the numbers. I forget what years and the pay and stuff. I'm like, there you go. Person who stood up and said that the teachers now are getting so much more money when they start. Same purchasing power. It's just like my grandfather and me. We both could buy the same amount of stuff. And so that person was stuck at getting paid a starting salary at something like $5,000 in the 70s. And to them, a starting salary of $40,000 in the 2000s, that we're rich. We weren't rich. It's just that person's mind got stuck and didn't account for inflation. I'm sure people not being able to mentally recognize inflation causes so much more problems. I just can't think deeply into it in what they are right now. I guarantee it happens though. Humans are not good at seeing small 1 to 2% changes of prices per year, and they get stuck, and it makes them unable to accurately understand prices after 10 or 20 years. I just don't know the implications. And finally, this is all the inflation I can think about for this year. I'm sure there's even more, but this is it. The final idea. It doesn't mean, just because prices rise 2% a year, it doesn't mean everything rises the same. Some things get really more expensive, and some things get a heck of a lot cheaper. All right? Individual items or categories, they don't always follow inflation. And usually, when things get way cheaper, it's because we did something really good as an economy. And we don't really buy, when things get cheaper all over the place, for one specific thing, we think of it as a good thing usually. Okay? Like, for example, TVs. Why don't you go back to 2007? 2007, a pretty pretty goodish TV was $1,600 for a 50-inch good TV. $1,600. You can buy a 60-inch TV for $600 now. I don't know what the numbers are. It's so much cheaper and it's so much better. Like the average cost of a quality TV has totally gone down since the 2000s. It literally has. So as prices rose, the prices of TVs in general have gone down. And that's usually a good thing. And of course it is, because technology advanced and it's cheaper to do the same thing. And there's more competition. And production costs have gone down. All the things that you want to go down in price make the TVs better and cheaper. So they defeated inflation. Good for TVs. Gas is pretty much around inflation, okay? Housing is pretty much around inflation. But not everything is the same as inflation. So TVs, good for TVs. I don't know about cell phones. Not cell phones. But whatever. If something is way higher than inflation, it signals a problem. Maybe the supply is going away. Maybe production is a lot more costs, or maybe there's just something really wrong with the system. So if prices rise 2% a year, but for a certain thing, prices rise 10% a year, you've got a problem. And that's like college, private colleges, not public colleges. The private colleges, they have outpaced inflation. We did this earlier since 1995. It's like 2 or 3 times inflation. Instead, it's double what it should be. And that indicates a serious problem in the college system. If the prices are stable and the prices are predictable and the prices follow basic economic rules, I mean, college prices follow basic economic rules, but there's structurally something wrong with the price of higher education. It is following economic rules, and the economic rules are telling us that something's wrong. What is it? Too much demand. Too many people wanting to go to college for the amount of colleges. There's a really low supply of colleges and a really high demand of people. And the way that the government's been trying to fix this is giving people more money to go to college, creating more people wanting to go to college. The simple answer, people, it's simple. It's build more colleges. Raise the supply of colleges, the price will go down. Simple, simple. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong. The supply hasn't risen. That's a problem, and the demand has gone way up. Of course the prices have gone up in colleges. Online education might be very, very interesting because competition's going to come in, and it doesn't cost that much for those online classes to produce them. We're going to see something in a couple years. We're going to see something maybe. Healthcare has way gone above inflation, okay? Which tells us something is wrong with the healthcare system, whether it's the insurance, whether it's the supply, whether it's the demand. Something is out of whack, because prices of healthcare has gone up so much more than it should have based on inflation. So it's telling us there's a problem. These are the 2 biggest things in the U.S. currently in the 2020s that prices indicate a serious problem. And the problem is, the worry is that these are things we really want. We really want higher education. We really want healthcare. I mean, price of TVs, I don't care if the price of TVs, if there's a problem, if they go, who cares, it's TVs. This is serious stuff when it's the prices of college and healthcare indicate a serious fundamental problem in the supply and demand. So that's how inflation can tell us there's a problem in college and healthcare. All right, that is absolutely it for this year on inflation. See ya.